Hey guys, Peter here to tell you about the latest from Arkona, Cobb, out June 16th on Napalm Records. This album has 8 tracks, 61 minutes in length, and this is the band's 9th full-length studio record. They are a Russian pagan metal band. The design of this record is outstanding. I love the fact that it offers a sense of beginning and end, and a very interesting journey in between. The opening track and closing track are really important in order to set the tone for what's coming ahead, and then set the tone for the experience that has just been completed. These two songs become important in the overall design and allows the journey that exists in between them to be more pleasurable, more enjoyable, and more entertaining. A record that also allows tracks to bleed from one into the next, making that journey continuous and not forcing it to be interrupted at every single turn. It makes things feel more seamless. It makes the fluidity of the record feel more seamless. And this adds value to the overall experience, because this is an album about experience, about darkness. Not darkness that necessarily surrounds us and it's created by an external force, but darkness that we as humanity create for ourselves and then have to learn how to live with it. That is the baseline of this album and of this design. When it comes to the sound, this is where the surprises start to appear, at least for me. I was expecting more of a ritualistic style record, and it doesn't come across that way. It comes across more personal, more intimate, a little bit more organic. It's an album that is all about how it makes you feel. It's all about how it feels to live in the world that we live in, how it feels to be surrounded by the things that we're surrounded by, and then how we deal with those obstacles that are put in our way. This is a record that concentrates more on that and not just on the ritual side of our very own existence. This allows them to bring different elements into the mix and allows them to use some elements that are perhaps more predominant in previous records, push them into a secondary role as far as the soundscape of this album is concerned. I was expecting more folk elements to be in the forefront, to be the drivers of the record. That's not the case. This is a very folk depleted record all around. There's still some tribalistic elements in the record, specifically with the vocals and how the vocals come across. Some of the chanting, some of the backing vocals really give that feel to the album. But sound-wise, this is definitely a blacker, darker feeling, more black metal driven record. Not that every song feels like a black metal track, but black metal has a little bit more of a hold on this record. Using synths also changes some of the songs. There's 3 specific tracks that are very synth driven, starting off with the opening track, which surprised me immediately in terms of how atmospheric it was and how much the synths really played a role in that same atmosphere. This is an element that feels almost foreigner to the band and to their sound, but it works in the design of this record because it allows you to feel like you are almost lost in space, or there's a haze around you, or there's a fog that surrounds you, and that fog is extremely dark. So you have those elements to create that atmosphere, and then you have that more black metal driven sound that really brings that atmosphere to life and makes it feel almost palpable. So when you look at this album, you have to talk about the synths as one of the elements of this record, because it's an element that really jumps out in terms of how it impacts not the overall album in terms of touching every single song on it, but how it impacts the overall experience for the breadcrumbs that it leaves along its way, along the journey of this record. The other element is the guitars. This is definitely an album where the guitars offer a lot of diversity, from the acoustic side to the more heavier driven black metal side of their sound. It's a very dynamic album from that perspective. But I think the other interesting element about the guitars is that they were not just used in the way that you would expect them to be used. It's taking away an approach and implementing elements from a completely different genre into that approach. For example, using acoustic guitar to play a more death metal riff or to play a more black metal riff, but with acoustic elements. That is thinking outside the box. That's using the same instrument but in a very different way in order to create a different perception of what the song is about and the atmosphere that surrounds that same song. This shows incredible flexibility in terms of what you're going to do musically, and not being afraid of taking risks and gambles and pushing your parameters as far as a band is concerned. Really showing your creativity without being afraid of repercussions coming from that same creativity. Vocally, you expect the dynamics to be there. It's an album where the screaming vocals are there. That's the bread and butter of Arkona. If you come to an album, you come expecting that sort of delivery, that more guttural delivery, that more organic feel delivery, where the hairs on your arms stand up because it just feels so personal. It just feels that it's coming from such a deep place within you. So that is still there throughout this record. I would say that's the bulk of the vocal performance on this album, but the clean vocals on this record are extremely well done, well delivered. Either be as backing vocals or as the main vocals on tracks, they're always there to help create the ambiance that the sound is putting together. They almost become part of the sound, and you look at them from a different place. It's, at least in certain songs, you look at them from a different place because of how well they blend in the overall sonic perspective of the track. But in the songs where the clean vocals come in as they should come in, more as a vocal approach, you also feel connected to them because there's a little bit of a different emotion represented by them, and they slow things down. They give you a different set of perspectives, and they allow the tracks to have a lot more movement laterally as far as the vocal performance is concerned, because musically this album is very volatile. From song to song, within songs themselves, there's no barriers, there's no bounds in terms of where they can go musically. So allowing the vocals to show a little bit of flexibility from that point of view matches well with the flexibility that exists on the sound. Overall, not as folky as I was expecting it, a little bit more electronic than I was hoping for, but still a great album nevertheless. It's a different side of the band. I feel like this is a different kind of ritualistic experience, if you will. It's an album that feels more introspective, that feels more like you're diving into a dark mind and seeing the darkness that that same mind then puts into the exterior world, and that creates a different type of ritual, that creates a different type of experience. It could still be pagan, it could still be folk related, not using those elements in the forefront, allowing the experience to make you feel like they're impacting it from the backdrop. As far as favorite songs are concerned, I want to start off with the opening track, Izrechenie Nachalo. This opening track is really important because this track is super atmospheric, very synth influenced song with clean vocals, and clean vocals that feel like they are at the distance. This track is important for a simple reason. It sets the tone for what the album is going to be all about, and it's that first pillar of the record. The vocals almost feel like a radio frequency that was recorded and sent through radio waves, and you're listening it on a recording, or you're listening it on the radio, and you're getting this recording of a lost civilization almost. It has that dark sense, that ominous vibe, that whose voice is on this tape, that voice no longer exists. That's the kind of atmosphere that those vocals set that help really enhance what the sound is already giving you. Next you have Yidi, the longest song on the record, almost 12 minutes long. And it's a track that has incredible ebbs and flows. It's a very extensive song in terms of how textured it is and how well orchestrated it becomes. It offers a lot of black metal elements in terms of what drives the sound and what impacts the atmosphere. It has great guitar sound from beginning to end, but it also has a diversity of vocal approach that makes the song feel like it has a lot to offer. Some of those approaches vocally have some folkiness to them, specifically with the clean vocals. Not necessarily in the forefront, but you could see the influence in the background that pushes them to give a little bit of that vibe. So it's an album that hides its folkiness, or gives it in a different perception, or it gives it in a different platter. And this song kind of allows you to see a little bit of that, or at least you want to see a little bit of that on the record. It's definitely a dark song. It's definitely a song that has great movement, ebbs and flows, musically and vocally. It's just a track that has a lot of ambiance to it. I would say that's a song that feels almost like a trance. It puts you in a trance state of mind. It has a lot of repetition, but it's not about the repetition. It's about the movement that that repetition creates. Interesting song all around. Last but definitely not least, Ugasaya. This track also has a lot of synth elements in it, and they help develop the atmosphere. They help create the walls of what this song is going to be all about. It brings a bleak, ominous experience to the sound. More often than not, that's exactly what those synths will do. moving into a much brighter sound. It's definitely a song that grows and progresses. It starts off with those synths, with that ominous vibe. It starts to build, it starts to become bigger, heavier, thicker, more volume, and everything moves along with it. It's almost like a snowball effect. The more that it moves, the bigger that it gets. And that's an important experience to give a song like this, because you allow to see yourself just growing and progressing with it. It has great intensity, both musically and vocally. Musically first, you see the intensity growing musically as the song progresses, and then you see that intensity grow vocally as you reach the latter stages of the song. I love this sense of progression. It works really well. It goes from a more cold experience to a more warm experience to a very dark experience, allowing you to blend all those different stages as you're moving along. This is it. This is Arkona with Cobb, out June 16 on Napalm Records. Let me know your thoughts on the band, on the singles. Use the comment section below. I'll be reading those and getting back to you. Take care, guys.